Hi guys, welcome back to New Zealand Mysteries. I'm TJ. As you can see, this week, or this episode, we're going to talk about the disappearance of Jo Chatfield. She was a 17-year-old who went missing back in 1988, and it was believed at the time and since that police and the media have not given this much attention, but we're certainly going to give it the attention today. Firstly, just a couple of things to go over. Of course, we're a community here at New Zealand Mysteries trying to bring awareness to missing persons and unsolved murders, mainly from New Zealand, but some stories from around the world as well. Apologies for the audio and quality of the video, it's just basic stuff and I'm working with what I've got. In the description box below, you can find links to our Facebook page, and we go onto Facebook and we share the crap out of all these stories. The idea is we want to get it out as far and wide as possible, so that hopefully it gets under the noses of the people that need to see it, and will finally open up, tell the information that they need. Also in the description box below, you'll find links to the website. We have an extensive range of database, I should say, of missing persons and unsolved murders. I think it's the biggest in New Zealand. If you would like to support the channel, it's greatly appreciated. You can buy me a coffee for $3 or Patreon, links are below, and that would be helpful. If you like the content, please click like or dislike, and please subscribe and hit the bell and the notifications. The numbers that you can call if you have any information will also be in the description box below, but all the information about the case is going to be at the end of the episode, along with all the sources that we've used for the show. They'll be in the description box below. And I don't mean any disrespect or harm or hurt to any family members or friends associated with the case. I'm just trying to bring awareness and give a voice to these people. Let's get started. As I said, this is the story about 17-year-old Jo Chatfield that went missing in 1988. The first place I'm going to go is to reddit.com, and it's a post that was written a couple of years ago by a friend of hers, and it's let's have a look. So the title, it says, "My friend Joanne Chatfield disappeared from Auckland in 1988. I should say. She has been declared officially dead, but the case remains unsolved." In 1988, my friend Joanne Chatfield, an absolutely lovely, friendly girl who was an inspiration to anyone who met her, disappeared after attending a gig at Auckland University. She was last seen walking up Princess Street crying. This crying thing, I don't think it's widely reported on, but nonetheless. She has been officially declared dead, yet the case is unsolved, and there appear to be absolutely no leads. Every time there's a list of unsolved murders or disappearances in New Zealand media, Joanne is never mentioned. Well, she's definitely mentioned now, that's for sure. The police did not take her disappearance seriously at the time. They considered her just some young punk chick that had run away and would turn up in some squat somewhere. By the time they took the case seriously, the evidence was long cold. It says, "I have written twice to the detective in charge of the case, Len Lalini, to ask about its status and if it's genuinely cold, and to get access to the case files. I knew some of Joanne's friends and associates. I know the lifestyle she lived, and I even know at least one piece of information that the police do not. Yet I can't even get the detective to return my messages." It says, "I'm not entirely sure why I'm posting here, other than out of frustration with the silence from the police and to keep Joanne's memory alive. The fact she's never mentioned in any lists of missing New Zealanders, in my opinion, is shameful. Joanne was undoubtedly murdered, and the person who killed her is still at large. Joanne's parents don't even have a body to bury, a grave site to visit. It's like she never existed. Well, that's just absolutely tragic. If it was like that. And, this is a case, to be honest, that's not highly featured. It's not one that I hear about often. And the only reason I do know about it is because it's been on my database on my website for a couple of years. I've had it on there since about 2018. But as far as media goes and that, yeah, I agree. I haven't heard of it a lot. But let's get into it. Now, the couple of articles that I'm going to use for this episode are all from the year 2018. There are a few more, but they again were all the same and copying sort of each other and from 2018. I know back when she went missing there wasn't really internet, so it goes to show that there isn't stories from back then, I guess. But so this one was from December 2018 from the county's Manukau Police. A tribute to Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers, County's Manukau, SCIB. Remember, again, this is from 2018 and this reward is not current anymore. But it says 30 years after she went missing, police are renewing a reward of up to $50,000 in the hope that new information will be brought to light in the unsolved case of Joanne Chatfield. Joanne was aged 17 when she went missing in Auckland Central on November the 19th, 1988. She was last seen prior to midnight leaving a function at the Auckland University campus and walking down Princess Street towards Wellesley Street. I'm not from Auckland. If you're not from Auckland like me, then here's sort of a little bit of a map. So Princess Street is here, and this may have changed. Gosh, it's over 30 years, so the layout might have changed, but here's Princess Street, and this is Wellesley Street here, so that's where she was. Back to this. Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers says Joanne was likely the victim of foul play, and despite the case remaining unsolved, police are determined to leave no stone unturned in an effort to confirm Joanne's fate and finally bring closure to her family. A similar reward was offered in this case in 2007, but unfortunately no information came forward that was able to help with the investigation, and the reward was unclaimed. He says, "We know there are people out there with information that will help us finally solve this case. Relationships and loyalties change over time, and our hope is that someone who has knowledge of Joanne's fate, whether they were connected at the time or told information later, will do what's best for Joanne and her family and come forward to police." He says, "We have not given up hope in this case, and we have been able to solve similar cases in the past where new information is brought to our attention decades later." So he just goes again on about the reward. However, it was only in force until 4th of May 2019, my birthday, 4th of May, not 2019 obviously. So we'll go to stuff.co.nz. It says the story was originally published by North and South and is republished with permission. So first it goes on and says about the reward at the time. Police were renewing a $50,000 reward offer in the suspected cold case murder of Auckland teenager Joanne Chatfield and are offering immunity against prosecution. And just because that's not there, that's no reason not to come forward. A cover story in North and South in November revealed new information in the case when police disclosed that another young woman at the same concert was abducted at knife point and raped hours before Chatfield went missing, and they believe the incidents are linked. Detective Senior Sergeant Sean Vickers of Counties Manukau East CIB says police are determined to do everything possible to confirm Chatfield's fate and finally bring closure to her family. He says, "We know there are people out there with information that will help us finally solve this case." Again, relationships and loyalties change over time, and our hope is that someone who has knowledge of Joanne's fate, whether they were connected at the time or told information later, will do what's best for Joanne and her family and come forward to police. He says, "We have not given up hope, and we have been able to solve similar cases in the past." In an inquest in 2008, Auckland coroner Murray Jameson concluded that Chatfield had probably met with foul play and was dead. A $50,000 reward offered in 2007 failed to produce any new information. Detective Sergeant Len Lalini, who was in charge of a reinvestigation of the case that ran for about 3 years from 2005, believes the man who abducted and raped the woman on the same night is likely to be the same person responsible for Chatfield's disappearance. He says, "If we find one, there is a good chance we will find the other. For something like that to happen on that night, at that time, what are the chances? And it's the most obvious connection." He says, "We have to be careful not to say they are one and the same, but you could say with a reasonable degree of confidence that there could be a connection between them." The woman had been too traumatized by the attack at the time to go to the police, but finally disclosed what had happened when the reinvestigation team were interviewing concert goers. And it must have been absolutely traumatizing for her. It often is for victims of rape, and often they can't come forward because they fear that no one's going to believe them, and there's going to be victim blaming, and there definitely won't be any of that here. Friends and family of Chatfield, who was into punk music and animal rights, told North and South the first inquiry into her disappearance had not been rigorous enough because she was treated as a runaway. Joe's mother, Claire Chatfield, says when police called out of the blue to say the inquiry was being reopened in the mid-2000s, they told her it had been mishandled and they had found things that should have been done that weren't. "I felt judgment calls had been made because of how she dressed." So police admitting that is to her mum is pretty horrible. And it's horrible to know that, she was just 17. She was still young. And pisses me off to no end. There's information there if you know anything, but I'll have that information at the end of the show and also in the description box below. So we're here at noted.co.nz. Joanne Chatfield had been gone 8 weeks by the time her university entrance results arrived at her Mangere Bridge home in South Auckland. The envelope sat unopened on her bed in a room that her mother Claire left untouched until she moved house a decade ago. In many ways, the room was Joe, with its line of stuffed toys sitting on a pretty floral bedspread, a jarring contrast to the black walls above that were crowded with posters, anarchy, amnesty, and anti-vivisection. Here lived the kind little girl, the feisty and independent punk rocker, the talented but conflicted young woman who wanted to change the world. Perhaps she would have, but Jo Chatfield never got the chance. She's been gone 30 years now, and that envelope is unopened still. Her mum, Claire, says if I opened it, I'd be admitting she is dead. And just can't fathom how this poor mother feels with nothing. No news over 30 years. She's got no body to bury or have a funeral with, and then the police admit to her that they messed up on a few things. Few vanishings have been as complete and mysterious as that of Jo Chatfield. There are missing persons cases that are household names. Jo Chatfield is not, but police believe that, like them, she was most likely abducted and murdered in 2008. Auckland coroner Murray Jameson concluded Chatfield had probably met with foul play and was dead. In response to North and South's inquiries, police renewed their offer of a $50,000 reward in the case and revealed disturbing new information about what happened at the concert she attended at the Auckland University Students Association building on the night that she was last seen, 19 November 1998. But remember, the reward has now lapsed. Police have discovered a woman was kidnapped at knife point from the gig, taken 200 to 300 metres away into a bush and raped. It was the most significant new lead uncovered during a reinvestigation of the case that began in late 2005 and ran for more than 2 years. Detective Sergeant Len Lalini, who was in charge of that inquiry, said cases such as Chatfield's are never really closed and the reinvestigation was not that unusual. But several people who spoke to North and South said police told them at the time they were taking a fresh look after admitting the first missing persons inquiry hadn't been thorough enough. About 6 police were assigned in 2005 and close to 100 people were interviewed, but the file was largely inactive again by 2008. The $50,000 reward for information in November 2007 produced nothing new of any value. Lalini now believes that if the rape victim's attacker can be found, the mystery of Chatfield's disappearance may be solved as well. He says if we find one, there is a good chance we will find the other. For something like that to happen on that night at that time, what are the chances? And it's the most obvious connection. We have to be careful not to say they are one and the same, but you could say with a reasonable degree of confidence that there could be a connection between them. The woman disclosed the attack to people close to her when it happened, but felt no one believed her, which is exactly what I was saying. It's a huge reason why women don't come forward. It has had a profoundly negative impact on her life. She did not report the attack to police. Detectives came across her only when they were tracing as many people as they could find who had been at the concert. This was not done when Chatfield disappeared. Even her close friends who were at the gig say they were not formally interviewed at the time, which is a bit shocking. A full scene examination was done, which unsurprisingly revealed nothing. However, as a result of the woman's disclosure, police began looking for anyone with a record of suspicious behaviour in the university environs, not just for sexual offending, but even minor infringements, such as trespassing. They also re-interviewed men who had been jailed for serious sexual violence. They were committing their offending at the time Joe went missing. We certainly put the wind up a couple of them, but there wasn't any evidential link between them. Lalini believes that as relationships and loyalties change over the years, it is still possible for those who know what became of Joe Chatfield to come forward. He says time can be an enemy in some ways because people's perception of what happened changes. But the good thing about it is that people who influence someone to stay silent do move on. That's one of the things about a cold case. You don't know where you're going to get your answer from. And here we have a picture of Joe Chatfield at school, and this is her here. Joe Chatfield had big plans that weekend. She went missing 30 years ago. She had her last day at Onehunga High School on Friday, the much anticipated concert to attend on Saturday, and on Sunday she was leaving home and moving into a flat. The last reliable sighting of her was by one of her best friends, Jenny Stone, and her flatmate Nigel Misson, immediately after the University of Auckland gig. There had been violent incidents at another compulsory Joy gig at the university. Hubbard had his nose broken by an aggressive skinhead, after which he demanded the university change its security firm. But he told North and South this one attracted a smaller, quieter crowd. At about midnight, when the show was over, Stone and Myson were standing outside when they offered Joe a lift home. She said, "No, I'm just going to go and crash under a bush," says Stone. Chatfield then walked down a path towards Simon Street. "I was concerned, but Joe was very headstrong, like we all were at that age." And that's very true. And back in 1988, I think, you didn't have that fear of something going wrong. There wasn't as much stranger danger, I guess, back then. Chatfield may or may not have had a plan as to where she was heading that night. It was clear the night wasn't over for her. She might have got into a car with someone she knew, but I think that's unlikely. The trouble with it is that if they knew her, the type of people she hung out with, it wouldn't last long as a secret. Indeed, he says, what struck him during the reinvestigation in the mid-2000s was that everyone who was friendly with Chatfield or knew her at all bent over backwards to help. He said some were almost over-helpful. Anything they could possibly remember they gave us, even if they weren't 100% sure about it, which made our job a bit more difficult when you had to follow everything. Don't know if I like that statement. They were trying to help. They were, he says, the wrong type of people to have had anything to do with her disappearance and be able to keep it to themselves, making it more likely that the person who encountered her was a stranger. More realistically, he says, someone driving past happened to cross her, stopped and attacked her, dragging her into the car. It's hard for me to prove, he said, but that's my general feeling. She wouldn't be a pushover unless you were quite determined about what you were going to do. You'd avoid her. She gave an air of confidence about herself. I don't think she'd come across as a victim if she was walking down the street. Because of the way she's dressed, she'd be a little fiery, so you wouldn't casually approach her if you didn't have a specific purpose. Despite being the last person to see Chatfield alive, something that's haunted her all her adult life, Jenny Stone says she can't remember being asked to give a statement until the reinvestigation 20 years later. She says, I was disappointed that they thought she'd just run away from home. It was ridiculous. I didn't think they cared at the time. I felt they thought it didn't matter anyway because it was just a teenager and not even a normal teenager, an odd-looking teenager. Stone doesn't have any theories about what happened after Joe walked away from the university that night. She says, I just wish I could see her again. It's a massive gap in my life, but I'm a fairly positive person, so a piece of me always thinks she will show up one day. There have been conflicting reports about Chatfield's demeanour at the gig, with several people reporting they saw her upset or in tears. Now, we heard about that from the previous article. Stone recalls she was just normal Joe, but Myson, who now works for a natural health store, says she was upset at times, although he can't remember what about, and also happy at others. He says, I remember her dancing and I thought she was drunk. I think there might have been a few tears. I think she was just all over the place emotionally. Gig goers also told police about seeing Joe sitting outside, appearing to help another girl who was extremely intoxicated. Leilani says, Joe stood up, she had a can in her hand and threw it, and then ran through an area where there were seats outside and started screaming. But it wasn't a scream as if she was upset, but a scream as if she was really happy, saying Yahoo for whatever reason. That was the closest we came to her being upset about anything. He says other people police spoke to said Joe Chatfield was quite lucid. He says we interviewed the barman, who said she was trying to chat him up so she could get free drinks. She probably had been drinking a fair bit, but not to the extent she'd be falling all over the place. Concert goers reported little out of the ordinary as far as drug use at the event. Joe, like many teens, smoked dope, but there was no evidence she was into anything harder. Glenn Beaumont, another punk rocker and schoolmate of Joe's at Onehunga High School, although a year younger, often attended gigs at the university with her. He says apart from cannabis, the drugs of choice were prescription pills like codeine and travel sickness pills crushed into vodka. He says that was pretty common. But Joe always seemed very responsible, he says. The tightly knit punk followers at high school weren't allowed to wear their mohawks up at school. but at weekends they would use Lux Flakes and hot water to style their hair into colourful spikes because they couldn't afford gel, and that is definitely not one I've heard before. In May, Beaumont asked for help on social media to find out how to access the police files after getting no response from his calls to investigating officers. His search for information was triggered by another news story about a cold case that failed to include Joe on a list of missing people. Joanne's parents don't even have a body to bury or a gravesite to visit. It's like she never existed. Apparently it was not unusual for Chatfield to walk home alone or to a friend's place from gigs, as she planned to do on the night she vanished. Like I said, back then it was a different time, you know. We didn't think about all the dangers or know so much about all the dangers out there and weirdos. Jo was excited by the prospect of an independent lifestyle, and she was actually moving out that weekend. The fact the room she'd be shifting into was old and dark with a broken window pane excited her, so you can sort of see the type of person she was. Although Jo Chatfield had entertained thoughts of becoming a journalist, she'd actually signed up for the dole a month before she left school, so the payments would start the week she finished. The inquest revealed that at the time she vanished, there was over $1,500 in her bank account, more evidence that she hadn't simply run away. Lelani says Jo was obviously looking forward to getting into her flat and making a life for herself, but the fact her new home was going to be in Onehunga, close to where her mother lived in Mangere Bridge, also typified the conflicted teen. She wanted to be out there, but she still had this really strong connection to her mother and wanted to be close to her. And I think we can all relate to that when we move out of home. This is a picture of Jo and her mate Jenny Stone and another girl, Lisa. This was taken in central Auckland on March 1988, 8 months before Jo disappeared, as they collected signatures on Queen Street for a petition opposing vivisection. And this is Jo with her mohawk on the left. She's got her own style. Just note, I know this is a long article and a long episode, but I'm determined to give Jo the attention and her story, the attention that she clearly didn't get from the police and the media. So I'm making sure that we know about her and what she was like and everything. It's 3 a.m. here, and I hope you can stick with me a bit longer. Close friend Jenny Stone describes Jo as a bit of an outsider. She said, "I think some people, for whatever reason, found it difficult to accept her as part of the punk community. They saw her as what you would call a try-hard, where you dress up to look like something, but you're not really that 100%, but she was 100%. And so, obviously, she struggled with feelings of being left out. Claire Chatfield, her mum, says the weekend Jo disappeared, she'd bought her some groceries for the new flat, a sign she'd reluctantly accepted her moving out. And I know myself, it's hard when your young adults move out of the house. She last saw her daughter about 7 p.m. on the Saturday night, when Jo hugged her goodbye and left to bus into town for the gig, wearing a black mini dress, black crochet top, a long coat, and her trademark black leather choker. And I'm pretty sure she probably had her trademark pink, maybe, mohawk. A Crime Watch reconstruction that screened on television in April 1989 produced a flurry of phone calls, including one from a taxi driver who said he'd picked up Chatfield from a rank in Victoria Street between midnight and 1 a.m. on either the Saturday or Sunday morning on the weekend she went missing. He said she was distressed, had only $4, and asked him to take her to the Upper Symonds Street, where he dropped her off. He said, "I didn't think it was safe or savoury place to drop a young girl at that time, and I told her so. Told her so, he told Blokes. I told her I'd take her home and her parents could fix me up with the fare, but the girl was adamant to be let out because she had to make a call. He last saw her heading towards a phone booth close by." Lalini says police cannot discount the driver's story but are unconvinced. If she's only got $4, Jo didn't strike me as the kind who's going to waste it on a taxi drive a couple of hundred metres up the road. She'd rather walk all the way to Mangaree than ask for help, and I tend to agree with them actually. A number of post-Crime Watch reports had Jo hitchhiking towards the South Island, but Lalini said those sightings were astray too. Though well-intentioned, he believes they'd confused Chatfield with her friend Jenny Stone, who was in the reenactment and had hitchhiked south. Now, if you know me, you know my stories, you know I really have a problem with the way reporters refer to the victim by their surname. I think it's impersonal and I don't know why they do it. And I'm in a horrible position because I'm sort of quoting what the websites are saying when I'd rather call her Jo, because that was her name. No one referred to her as Chatfield, I'm sure, in real life. But anyway, that's just me. Then there was the troubling phone call from an unknown man to Claire Chatfield, a week after Jo was last seen. The man told her Jo was staying with him for about 3 weeks, that she didn't want to see her mother and would see her when he'd sorted out the problem. A woman in the background was urging him to hang up, apparently in case the phone was bugged. They, the police, tapped my phone after that call, says Claire, her mum, but they could have traced it if they'd tapped it before. And this is former community constable Anne-Marie Harvey and Alf Filipina, who were in charge of the missing persons file in the weeks and months after Chatfield's disappearance. Jo Chatfield was not only in the wrong place at the wrong time, she was in the wrong era. If she'd disappeared in November 2018 rather than November 1988, it's unlikely her fate would still be a mystery. And that's true for many reasons. For one, we wouldn't have discriminated her and discounted her because of her looks. In November 2018, we embraced diversity. Also, she's a 17-year-old, so that's very vulnerable, and I'm pretty sure cops and the media would have taken a better notice of her now than they did in 98. Obviously, there would have been CCTV cameras everywhere in 2018, and with the social media, her face could have been splattered all over it, but they didn't have it. The good thing is we have social media now, and YouTube and stuff, and this means we can plaster her name everywhere and her story everywhere and make up for it, I guess. Jo's friends have criticised police for treating her disappearance as a missing person rather than a potential homicide from the start, and Harrington says today her case would be classed as high priority because of her age. But former community constables Anne-Marie Harvey and Alf Filipina, who you saw a picture of, who were in charge of the missing persons case file in the weeks and months after Jo's disappearance, believe it was taken seriously from the start. They called on halfway houses, Salvation Army and church hostels and flats where punk rockers lived together. Nothing was ever put in front of us to say it was anything other than a missing person. And every inquiry we got followed up, says Harvey. No one said anything, and that would make you alarm. She was never seen walking off with someone at the gig who might have looked untoward. She was never seen pushed into a car, and the moment she left the gig, that was it. Her mum, Claire, developed a close relationship with Harvey and Filipina, but she believes the investigation fell between the cracks higher up in the CIB. They didn't know how to handle it. I don't think they knew what to do. She was one of the first girls of that age to go missing. If she'd been younger or a prostitute or even older, but she was in that age group that I think she fell between the cracks. Claire Chatfield said when the police called out of the blue to say the inquiry was being reopened in the mid-2000s, they told her it had been mishandled and they had found things that should have been done that weren't. And that must really rip your knickers, I tell you. She thinks she was probably in tears at the time. She said, I felt judgment calls had been because of how she was dressed. Not so, says Filipina and Harvey. You get people you would look at sometimes and think, oh, the gothic look, oh heck. I'm really worried about where they are heading. But not for a minute did I get that impression, Joe, says Filipina, who is now an Auckland City Councillor. Harvey agrees. I would say deep down she was a neat kid, a lovely kid who wanted to do the things a bit differently and to be a little different. She was not on a downward spiral or anything. So this is a look into how caring and compassionate Jo was. This is a friend of hers. Certainly Jo's many kindnesses to her friends left a lasting impression. One is Dylan Bullock, who is now 46, and in 1985 was hit by a car and nearly killed crossing the road, leaving him with brain damage and impaired speech and unable to walk. He met Chatfield when they both attended Manukau, now Royal Oak Intermediate School. She was the sweetest girl. They were both into animal rights and punk music. He was in hospital for 6 months after he was hurt. When he came home, Jo would turn up every Saturday and take him out in his chair, often to the Manukau Harbour foreshore. Fearing his friends were tiring of visiting him, he had told them he was fine and that he didn't need them to come anymore. Either he never told Chatfield or she took no notice, because she kept visiting anyway. One day, he says he put his head back and looked up at her as she wheeled him down the street. She bent down and kissed him. She really kissed me. I was totally in love with her. What a sweet story. Bullock has had photographs of the most important people in his life framed in a composite image on his bedroom wall. There's his mum, dad, grandma and grandpa, his dog Ben, and a picture of Jo Chatfield. Chatfield also regularly visited Teresa Steele, an octogenarian Scot she met when selling raffle tickets at a retirement village. Steele last saw her on the 17th of November, 2 days before the university gig. Steele told Lynn Lotes that pair had stimulating conversations on a wide range of subjects, but that Chatfield seemed a lonely little girl who never appeared happy. When asked to describe Claire Chatfield, inadvertently slips into past tense. She was bright, not dark. She was kind and caring. She was a gentle soul. She holds on to the hope her only child has somehow been brainwashed or kidnapped by a cult and is still alive and well. The alternative is not a prospect she can bear. And at the end of that article, I've got some information of where you can ring and everything if you have something to share. Right, let's go over the notes of the case before we finish. And like I say, thank you for sticking around with me. I know it was a long one of listening to me talking, but I felt it was really important to get her the attention she deserves to have and her story to be told. So just a couple of points here. Her friends have said that every time there's a list of unsolved murders of disappearances in New Zealand media, Joanne is never mentioned. Cursor Jensen, Mona Blades, Amber Grace Cruikshank, they've all listed, but not Joanne. I do, however, have Joanne on my website. The police did not take her disappearance seriously at the time. They considered her just some young punk chick that had run away and would turn up in some squat somewhere. By the time they took the case seriously, the evidence was long cold. Jo Chatfield, 17, was last seen around midnight on November the 19th, 1988, when she left a gig at Auckland University in Princess Street. Police disclosed that another young woman at the same concert was abducted at knife point and raped hours before Chatfield went missing. They believe the incidents are linked. We know there are people out there with the information that will help us finally solve the case. Relationships and loyalties change over time, and our hope is that someone who has knowledge of Joanne's fate, whether they were connected at the time or told information later, will do what's best for Joanne and her family and come forward to the police. Police say they've not given up hope, and we've been able to solve similar cases in the past where new information is brought to our attention decades later. At an inquest in 2008, Auckland coroner Murray Jamieson concluded that Chatfield had probably met with foul play and was dead. A $50,000 reward offered in 2007 and also another one in 2018 failed to produce any information. Friends and family of Chatfield, who was into punk music and animal rights, told North and South the first inquiry into her disappearance had not been rigorous enough because she was treated as a runaway. Joe's mother, Claire Chatfield, says when the police called out of the blue to say the inquiry was reopened in the mid-2000s, they told her that her case had been mishandled by the police and that they had found things out that should have been done that weren't. And she says, I felt judgment calls had been made because of how she was dressed. And that's not good enough. I know if it was done now, in 2020, we embrace diversity. And we like to see different people around. And it's quite usual to see punks around and young ones just trying to see where they fit in and what niche they want to be in and stuff. Quite normal. So, do you know what happened to Joe Chatfield? Please call any police station and referencing Operation Chatfield. Contact Crimestoppers on 0800 555 111 or phone Detective Sergeant Len Lalini on 021 191 0626. Also anonymously online, crimestoppers-nz.org. So we are finally going to give Jo the attention that she never got from media and police, and we're going to put this on the Facebook page and also the YouTube, and I please beg and implore everybody to share it as much as you can, everywhere you can. Get her face right across these premiums, these platforms. Let's give her the attention she deserves and show her that we're going to do it for her. I'm going to sponsor the post myself in Facebook. So if you want to support and sponsor the episode, because I'm going to be paying for an ad campaign on behalf of New Zealand Mysteries to get this as far and wide as possible. Down here in buymeacoffee.com/NZ Mysteries, you can choose to buy me a coffee, and you just give your name, and if you like, you say something nice, and that's just $3. And what happens is the PayPal comes up. If you hit PayPal, then it gives you another option. And basically, you don't have to actually be a person, you don't have to have an account on PayPal, is what I'm trying to say. It says down here, or pay with a bank account or credit card. And of course, if you just want to buy one coffee, it's $3. And that really helps. I need to have support to be able to pay for the promotion of the ads that I do for stories, and also at some stage I'm going to need more equipment. The equipment I have just doesn't cut the mustard all the time, I must say. If you'd rather use PayPal yourself, I don't actually understand how I can find a link to my page. So if someone can tell me how to do that, it would be greatly appreciated. But I do have this request payment form, so if you're interested in helping out with a donation from this, I can send you an email. So you just need to let me know. and my email is nzmissing.co.nz. So just saying, we are finally going to give Jo the attention she never got from the media and police. So I wanted to give you a look at what patreon.com is, and to get here you go to patreon.com/nzmysteries, and this is a membership platform. So you can join one of three, and the first one is Crime Buff, which is $3 a month, and I give you a shout out at the end of every episode. $5 per month is bonus episodes plus shout out at the end of every episode, and the Crime Junkie for $10 a month. You get everything in here, but what you get also is a once a month live session with me. We talk about the show. I ask you what you like about the show and what you don't, if you have any ideas for making it better, and suggesting crimes and cases for me to follow. And then we just talk crime, really, about what we like and what we don't like. So that's how you can support Jo's story if you want, as I'm going to pay to have this story put out there as much as possible. Thank you very much for joining me. I know this was a bit of a long one, but I wanted to make sure she got a fair deal, and I wanted to make sure I got as much information about her as I could, so people could understand the person that she actually was, and she wasn't just stereotyped this time. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you can support and sponsor the show so we can get more views out there and get it under some people's noses and scare the crap out of them into coming forward, which is what everyone wants. So I hope to Joanne's friends that you feel like someone has given her some attention. And I'll see you next time. Bye.